Welcome to another edition of According to Ingrid. I have a wonderful guest in the studio with us today, the virtuous woman. And we celebrate her life, we celebrate her history, and we celebrate her designs. Welcome to the According to Ingrid show, Barbara Bates. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Barbara, you have such a unique life. You started out here in Chicago. You started your fashion design business, I guess, on your own at home, and you're self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
And you've risen over the years beyond your imagination. How did this all happen? Would you say it is God? Would you say it is
It's
His
by the
mercy?
grace of God. I mean, even though I'm a fashion designer and that's what people know me for, that's not really who I am. But I think that God led me down that path because people see fashion as something beautiful and wonderful and nice and cool to be around. And so I was given a gift to design, but I think that that gift afforded me the opportunity to have a voice in my community, and by having a voice, I've had other things that have happened to me in life, you know, some good, some bad, that have allowed me to use my voice to reach out, to help other people, to inspire other people, to educate other people.
Now you have quite a few things going. Let's just talk about. First of all, let's talk about how it all began. Which you were a secretary at First National Bank here in Chicago, and
I have to go back even further than that. For the blessings that I have today, they all began. I guess like my first thing that people talk about is me being a teen mom. I was 15 years old when I got pregnant. I was a sophomore in high school. Mm-hmm. It was devastating to me. It was devastating to my sisters, my brother, my mom. It was just a devastating time. And little did I know that something that had like crushed my spirit and was so devastating at that time would turn around, some 20 years later and be a blessing to the many that it has been a blessing for. And I guess we'll get to that some part later on.
So you had a daughter or a son?
I actually had a son, yeah. And I would love to say his age, but he's older than me now, so I can't say how old he is.
And so at that particular time, you knew that your life had taken a turn. So dreams that you had as a child, I guess they were disrupted at the time. Did you want to be a fashion designer as a kid?
I wanted to be a fashion designer from as far back as I can remember. Not necessarily a designer, but I wanted to be involved in clothing. I loved fashion. I loved textures. My mom and her sisters were beautiful. Growing up around them and seeing them, they were always well dressed. They were always in hair shows, and so they were always beautiful. So I love I love the way you could see a woman transform from being a housewife into being somebody beautiful by putting on clothes and makeup. So I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And Barbie dolls were big then, and instead of wanting Barbie dolls, I wanted the doll clothes. So I always loved clothes, and I always loved to go to school like dressed up. I wanted to be dressed up all the time. For any special occasion, I'd ask my mom because she bought me something new. So it was always important how I looked and how I dressed. That was just always something that I was always, like stricken by. I wanted to look nice.
So you had this inner peace about it.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
It was an inner peace, and what most people may not think that artists are driven on a spiritual level, but I believe that they are. I mean, when we look in the Bible and we look at Proverbs, the 31st verse, and it speaks about how a woman is virtuous, but also how she sews and she works well with wool and fabrics. I believe that God had a plan long ago, in your mother's womb perhaps, for you to be what you are today. And when we look back over the years, especially the past 20 years that I've known you, I mean the trials and tribulations, and also the victories and the triumphs. I mean, now you're worldwide, but the journey itself, it's a spiritual one, wouldn't you say?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, anybody can look at the career that I've had or that I have, and of course it was God ordained. I never went to school for fashion design. I mean, it was something that was innate. It was something that was just always in me. I mean, I knew about fabrics. I mean, I would go into fabric stores and I could speak with fabric. I knew what it would become before it was made. I never learned how to sew or make patterns. I knew how to draw. And so I would take my drawings and I would give them to people who could take them and turn them into life. And so, that was nothing, of course, that I did myself. I knew that there was always someone else that was like ordering the footstep. I didn't know where it was going to go, but I was willing to go wherever it was going to take me.
Now, you began a foundation 10 years into the business, because in the 80s is when you start coming to life.
Exactly.
You opened a showroom at that time, and it was your husband at the time,
Exactly.
your first husband.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, in the 90s, you opened up a foundation,
Right.
as well as a bigger showroom. Explain to our guest about that wonderful foundation, the Barbara Bates Foundation.
When my career started to go, I had a wonderful write-up in the paper, West Side Girl designs for Michael Jordan. And someone read it and called me up and said, I saw your article in the paper. I'm so proud of you. Are you the same Barbara Bates that had a baby when she was a teenager? And did you go to Family Living High School? And I thought to myself, well, who wants to know why?
Wow.
And this person said, you won't remember me, but I went to school with you, and I actually work with teen moms. And we would love it if you would come out and speak to the young girls, because I followed your story and I think that you have something to tell them. And I was apprehensive about going, because it's like, I'm not a speaker. What could I tell them? That was always a painful part of life, and it's not really something I had openly talked about.
Of course.
And I decided not to go, but the day that I was supposed to go, I got a phone call and I answered the phone. And so, I was convicted. I had to go. So I went, and it was in the old neighborhood that I grew up in. I walked in the room.
And that's the west side of Chicago.
On the west side of Chicago. It was at Bethany Hospital downstairs, a conference room, and I walked in the room, and there were about 15 or 20 young girls from ages 12 to maybe 15 years old. And I stood before them, and I recalled all of what happened to me during those teen years. And it was the first time. So even though I was releasing and giving them something to let them know that, you can do this, I was actually, giving some relief and a release to myself. I could just feel myself standing up taller and straightening up. And as I told my story, I saw triumphs in my story. I never thought about, wow, you were pregnant at 15, but you graduated from high school in 3 years on stage with honors. And I told that to them, but it was my first time hearing it.
Yeah,
yes, like I was feeling good about that. And then, after I talked to the young ladies, and it was quite emotional, everyone in the room was crying, even myself, I felt there was something I needed to do. And so I said, if you go back to school and you graduate, I'll make your prom dress for you. And, sometime later I started getting phone calls, and I held to my promise. I started making the dresses, and then I spread it out and started doing not just girls who were teen moms and went back to school, but girls, in school who were full-figured, and people made them feel bad because they weren't, the slim girl, or the girl, or even the young man who didn't have designer clothes, or who didn't have a mother and a father. So I didn't go looking for the best or the brightest. I went looking for the child who was, I'm making C's and I'm barely making this because it's hell at home and nobody really knows, and I can't hang out with you because you got designer stuff on and you don't think that I'm cool. I searched for those kids because I just felt that that's what I was supposed to do. I really don't have like any wonderful, prophecy to say why I did it. I just did it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
You were driven to do it.
I was.
Something drove you. So that foundation now has grown.
Yeah.
And you're having an event coming up. What is the event now?
I've actually given away over 500 prom dresses and about 200 suits to inner city kids who are deserving. And the foundation this year is doing something a little bit different. Even though I will still continue to give to high school students in need, the foundation this year is taking a different turn. I'm going to do my annual fashion show that I do, but this year I've got 55 women that are modeling for me, and all the women are breast cancer survivors.
Oh my gosh.
So.
Oh my God. And that's something that our viewers may not know. Barbara,
I'm a three-year survivor.
3-year survivor of breast cancer.
Right.
Now, when that happened to you, you were busy designing, you were traveling, and also the foundation was up, going strong. And of course, you had joined the Apostolic Faith Church,
right,
where Bishop Horace Smith is the pastor.
Right.
And I believe I ran into you, and you had mentioned it to me.
Right.
And I said it was just the trial, the test. When you began that journey with God again, then God says, sees it so He can trust you. How did you cope with all that?
Actually, while at church with Dr. Smith, he encouraged